gonna introduce our speaker here. First, how we met. Well, we met virtually in Milwaukee in 2015 when I was looking for grad school. And now my friend, he's on the phone right now, Chuck Drame. And I was, hey, he and I have been talking. We were actually roommates. And he was, hey, why don't you talk to this young lady, Violeta? She did her master in public, uh, peace studies. So you guys can talk. So we started talking, and she gave me good feedback with respect to what I do. So I'm really thankful for that. And with that, we met in person in 2016 during the wedding of sister. And our sister is on the phone right now. Great person. That's me right there trying to show my African swag. And that's her right there hiding, right? And then we have this. That's me. And that I'm dancing with our sister trying to show my African swag there. So I got an opportunity to meet her in person during her sister wedding. By the way, her sister got married to my friend who introduced me to her. So that's how we met. Now, about our speaker, she's originally from Spain, and her current place of residence, country of residence, is Iraq, but she currently lives in Spain because of COVID-19. And Miss Garcia, I have a lot of respect for this young lady. She's a very knowledgeable, very thoughtful, and even during my master thesis, and I reached out to her, she really helped me. And that's the reason why when I was thinking about inviting somebody, I was like, wow, she's a great person because I know she believes in this mission because she's already applying it in her life because she's doing humanitarian work. Every time that I reach out to her, she's there for me. So Ms. Garcia is a program manager at the United States Institute of Peace. And she has many years of experience in the peacekeeping realm, working for a renowned international organization such as Amnesty International, just for Common Ground, and then Church Aid. And she's going to talk about this in details here because if I talk about it, I won't do justice. And she has a BA in Peace Studies and a Master of Science in Global Studies from New York University, NYU. And her interest is Western Sahara and its political and legal implications on today's geopolitical landscape. And I'm really curious to hear about this. We can take this offline, Ms. Garcia, but I really would love to hear about your interest, more in details about your interest. And with that, I'm gonna intro Ms. Garcia. The floor is yours.
Thank you. This is really kind. I'm really looking forward, especially after seeing the pictures. That was absolutely necessary. I'm just turning my camera on. I feel it's rude talking to people without seeing them. So before I share my screen,
I'm gonna stop sharing. There we go.
So yeah, let me try. Beautiful. Let me try and present my screen, my entire screen, and I guess I'm gonna share. Can you guys see it yet?
Not yet.
Okay, so let me see. Let me try something else. Here. Okay, so before I start, I really wanted to say thank you, Musa, for having me. Can you see my screen now, just to make sure?
It's coming now. Yep, you can see it now.
Beautiful. So I wanted to say thank you so much for having me. Thank you, everyone, for being there and listening today. I know it's your Saturday, so I really appreciate that. Eid Mabruk for all of those celebrating in the call. And yeah, all in all, thank you for having me here. So just to know how this is going to go, I'm going to talk to 15, maximum 20 minutes. I'm going to talk to you about my work and what I've been doing. And I think it's important to mention before I start that since all of you come from very different backgrounds, I don't think any of you is doing peace building or development work or humanitarian assistance. I'm going to do kind of a streamlined presentation, kind of generic things that I think could catch your interest. And then leaving it for the Q&A to really go in depth into the questions that you really want answers to, or just opening it up for a discussion that it's of interest to each and every one of you. So that's how we go. I can't see you all on the screen right now, so if the sound doesn't work, if you have an immediate question or something happens, just feel free to interrupt me and jump ahead directly. So without further ado, here we go. Expectations, first and foremost. I want to say that the views are my own, and I think Musa did a great job at just like introducing myself very briefly, but just to paint the picture a bit more. I've been working for 9 years now in this field, humanitarian work, development work, call it X. And out of those 9 years, I think the last 4 to 5 years I've been in the field, specifically in the Central African Republic. I've been in Tunisia as well. I know some of you is from Tunisia, so that's great. And I currently live in Iraq. So that's kind of my background very quickly. I'm from Spain, born and raised, and then I went and did my schooling in the US. So this is not a holy grail of humanitarian and development work, meaning that this is not a masterclass or this is not International Development 101. It's more a set of reflections and things like that. And this is not an in-depth analysis of Africa's issues and how to solve them, but it is things to consider if you're remotely interested in development or humanitarian work. And even though the findings are generic to a specific field of work, they can be contextualized into different specific countries. We can do this during the Q&A. So what is this, right? What am I talking about? Be ready for a lot of text that's going to go in the screen right now. You don't need to read it. So what is humanitarian assistance? Usually humanitarian assistance is the kind of assistance, whether in cash or in kind, that countries receive after or during, immediately after or during an emergency. This emergency can be man-made, such as war, or it could be a natural disaster, such as a hurricane or things like that. And they're very much focused on keeping human dignity and life during an emergency or a crisis. Development work is a bit more looking in the longer term. It usually happens at the end of humanitarian work or simultaneously, and it more or less focuses on economic, social, and political development or relief to what we call developing countries, which that in and of itself could be a separate conversation. I'm not going to get into that. So what is peace building? Just to complicate things a bit more. Peace building initially focused on reconciliation and reconstruction, but nowadays it's taken on a broader meaning. With peace building, what we really want to do is understand the roots of conflict, whether violent or not violent, and address them. So because this is so broad, it could look like a million different things. So just to paint the picture a little bit more, when we talk about humanitarian assistance, you're probably thinking about Red Cross or Red Crescent societies. You're thinking about UN OCHA, which is a UN agency. You're talking about the UNHCR, which deals with refugees. We're talking about Doctors Without Borders and things like that. When we talk about development, you probably think of the World Bank, you probably think of the UNDP. And when you talk about peace building, you're probably talking about Search for Common Ground, USIP. They're like the great peace builder organizations, I guess, out there. You also have Promédiation, which is like a French NGO, different things. So for the purpose of this conversation, we're going to call them all the same. It's just for you to have a frame of what I'm talking about, but I'm going to be referring them to these things interchangeably. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to present 5 key findings or 5 key areas of reflection that we should think about when we talk about this kind of work. All right, the first one is do no harm, because we all know that the road to hell is paved with good intentions, meaning you may have the best interest at heart when working in the humanitarian field and end up doing something that causes harm somehow, as much as we don't want to. So do no harm is not a principle that I just came up with. Do no harm is the basics of all humanitarian work. So I think it's important to keep this in mind. How can we cause harm unwillingly? First of all, we can cause harm to local economies. Let me give you an example. Imagine that we are in Senegal and that Senegal goes through a famine. Unlikely, but imagine it happens. So the Senegalese people have no food. And here comes the World Food Program and they go buy tons of rice bags from China and they give them to the Senegalese. So a bunch of the Senegalese are going to be incredibly happy. Ooh, free food, wow, great. But the people in Senegal that work in the rice growing business, their economies are going to be incredibly hurt because you just introduced an external rice that devaluated the rice they are producing. So that's an example of how you can cause harm by wanting to do something great. We can foster conflict by trying to do a humanitarian intervention. Example, I'm a humanitarian convoy and I'm bringing medicine to Syrians that are in the Assad control area or in any control area, doesn't matter. So I'm going with my car, and as every humanitarian convoy goes through checkpoints, and every checkpoint is manned, meaning there's people in the checkpoints. Usually humanitarian convoys are being asked for money at every checkpoint. If you want to pass your humanitarian goods, your medicine, your food to the people that really need it, you're probably going to have to pay at a checkpoint to the very people that are creating the war, that are a party of the conflict. That poses a humanitarian dilemma. What is more important, getting this food across or not funding this war industry? And these are real examples. These are not just whatever. So this is something to think about. And the final example is, do we cause psychological harm when we're trying to empower beneficiaries? One example here is rape victims. As sad as it is, rape is being used as a weapon of war in conflicts all over the world. Example, the Yazidi population in Iraq, the Congolese women during the conflict that happened in Congo. So what do we want to do? As the international community, we want to bring justice. We want to make sure the voices of these women are heard. We want to give them a platform. We want to empower them, which is one of our buzzwords. So what do? We give them the mic. We're like, tell your story. But maybe as a raped woman, I don't want to tell my story a million times, because telling my story a million times is reliving my story a million times. Approaching this kind of collectives without a psychosocial support needed for these kind of things may be causing much more harm than not. So this is a guiding principle for all humanitarian interventions, and it can be applied in every single country. Other things to think about is framing your intervention, meaning what do I want to do, right? You might have an idea that you think is great. It comes to putting it into action, and it just doesn't work the way you envision it because you didn't stop and think before putting this into action. Let me give you one example, a real example. We have COVID-19. And a lot of the partners that I've been working with, local partners, they come and they tell me, we're giving away food baskets because of COVID-19. And I'm like, oh, why? Because of COVID-19. I'm like, okay, it could be a really great example that, COVID-19 happens. I don't have the same purchasing power. I lost my job. I cannot buy food. I don't have food in my house. So getting food baskets is great. But you might be giving food baskets in places where people have enough food. Even if they don't have jobs, they have their own farms. They're farmers. They have cows. They can kill the cows and get the food. So maybe in this case, they need psychosocial support. So one activity can be a great idea or a horrible idea, depending on how you frame it. So things that we do need to consider when doing any kind of intervention. A needs assessment. Prior to going into action, we understand the needs of the community that we're working in, and no two communities are the same. So it needs to be a nuanced assessment. A theory of change. Theory of change is actually what you have in the screen. It's called a logic model, but it's a theory of change. A baby, if I cry, then my mom and dad will appear. When you do any kind of humanitarian intervention, it needs to be the same. If I give food to people with no food, then we'll be covering one of their very basic needs. It sounds very easy. When putting an entire project into a short one-paragraph theory of change, it becomes really complicated. A logic model. A logic model is another tool of humanitarian work that tells you how your activities will lead to objectives that will lead to goals. And it tells you how your goal can be broken down into objectives, and those objectives will be achieved by doing activities. So it needs to be read both ways. Same for outputs. Outputs lead to outcomes, lead to impact. It's just a tool, meaning you really need to logically explain your intervention to yourself prior to going ahead and implementing. Relevance. Why does this matter? If you cannot really tell yourself why what you're doing truly matters using all of the tools above, I really doubt you'll be able to convince a donor to give you the money to do your intervention. So this is something really important. And the key to any kind of humanitarian project or development project is monitoring and evaluation. Every single intervention has indicators that you measure as you go. That's monitoring. If your indicators are not going well, then you have to revise your implementation. At the end of the project, you will go through an evaluation, hopefully an external evaluation. So you will hire someone to help you tell whether or not you achieve your objectives. So these are things just to generally keep in mind. Actually, let me give you an example of a good intervention, precisely in light of COVID-19. When I was working in Tunisia, or one of my partners working in Tunisia right now came up with a great idea that was giving away masks, but it was the civil society giving away masks to police, to the security forces. Civil society means normal people, right? And you might think, why is the normal people giving masks and gels for hand sanitizers to the police? How does that make sense? It turned out that in this particular place of Tunisia, we have had a history of conflict in the past. So 2 years ago, a group of protesters took over to the streets. They were protesting something. The local police, by mistake, or that's the general narrative, went in and killed one of the protesters. And since that day, the relationships between police and the normal people have been incredibly horrible. So in this particular case, having the normal people reaching out to the police and giving masks and a gel was read as a sign of goodwill, and it's sparking a very needed dialogue between security forces and the population that is unexisting in many, many, many of the places that I've worked with. And it's key that your police and security forces get along with the people that they're supposed to protect. So this is an example, very simple activity, very well thought out, that's producing an outcome of dialogue between these two components. So just an example. Coordination. Coordination is key. You have a wonderful proposal, and my question is, have you thought if someone else is doing this already? Because if you thought of a great idea, maybe someone else thought of this before. So things we do need to consider is anyone else doing this? And out of all of the people that are working in this area that I'm interested in, how do I get into the picture? So if I want to give away food, is anyone else giving away food? If I want to do a dialogue between police and security forces, is anyone else doing this? And if they're doing it, is there a gap that I can fill? So let me give you a good example of coordination. In Iraq, we have the World Food Program, and they give away food to IDPs. IDPs is the people that are displaced in camps. Let's call them refugee camps. Technically, they're IDP camps, doesn't matter. So they're displaced, and the World Food Programs gives them food every once in a while. So if I'm an IDP, I'm a displaced person, and I say, okay, I wanna get this food, right? How? When are they gonna give food? Where am I supposed to get it? What's the distribution mechanism? I wanna have all of this information, but the World Food Program simply gives away the food. So the World Food Program is partnering with UN Ops, which is another branch of the UN. And this UN Ops has something called IDP Information Center. It's really a call center like Verizon's call center, the same. But what they do is they give information to the IDPs to inform them of the kind of initiatives that are happening around them and how can they benefit from that. So the World Food Program, ahead of any large distribution, calls UNOPS. UNOPS has a database with phone numbers. They call every single IDP. Now the IDPs know when is the distribution going to happen, who qualifies for this distribution, etc. This phone line even includes a complaints handling mechanism, meaning that if as an IDP you feel like you were wronged, you can anonymously complain to the UN of another UN distribution, which is incredibly important for accountability, because we need to be accountable to our beneficiaries. So I think that was a wonderful example of how you do coordination right. One more thing I wanted to mention is inclusivity. Many times we don't include certain groups of people into the picture. We usually think of women and youth. Women and youth, it's in every donor's mouth. How are you going to include women and youth? But we also have the LGBTQI community. We also have the community that have special needs in terms of mobility. We can also talk about the community with PSS, psychosocial support special needs. So how do we include these people is incredibly important in any kind of humanitarian activity that we do. So let's go back to the basics, women and youth. So simple, right? Just include them. No, because we're talking about two different things. One is your beneficiaries, meaning the people that you're trying to provide help or assistance to. And another one is your decision-making structures. So who in society has power? And these are two very different things. It's very easy to include women and youth into food distributions, but it's very hard in including them in having a say in, I'm going to be the one distributing the food and I'm going to say who gets the food or not. Usually these are men-held structures. Two examples, very visual examples. What you see in the picture is Iraqi tribal leaders. Why is it hard to include women into the Iraqi tribal society? Because Iraq's tribal leadership, by definition, is old, and it's male. I have never seen a female tribal leader in Iraq. So how to include women voices into these spaces is concerning. Now you might say, oh, you know, Iraqis, they're really the third world. This has nothing to do with us. Here's another example. Here's the Catholic leadership. I know this is not the case with every Christian, but Catholics in particular do not allow women to take certain positions of power. Why does this matter? Because in any peace building or reconciliation process, tribal structures, religious structures have formal and informal power over their communities, and they know how to use it. And there's no way to logically add a woman into this process. So being mindful of inclusivity, I have examples, but we can leave this for the Q&A because I promised to only talk for 15 minutes and it's already 15 minutes. But doing this, keeping this in mind in any kind of process that involves assisting your population is key. The last finding or the last key area that I want to highlight is professionalism. We're not Dora the Explorer as much as we may look like we are sometimes. And I just want to emphasize that precisely because our work doesn't have any kind of accountability mechanism. There's no court that someone could take me if I really mess up in one country, really. So precisely because there's no accountability systems in place, I think professionalism is a principle that should be upheld in any kind of humanitarian intervention. You need to have certain knowledge, you need to have certain tools, and you need to approach this work away from the volunteering mindset. So I'm not saying that volunteering is not important. I'm saying that certain standards should be upheld. So that's going to be all for me. That was my presentation. Thank you all for your attention and opening it up for discussion. I'll stop sharing my screen now.
Thank you, Ms. Garcia. That was a very good presentation. Thank you for giving us that high level. It's always good for us, especially living in the Western world. Like sometimes we see things on TV, but we don't really know what's going on the ground. So having somebody like you to share those, details with us is very, very important. So this is how we're gonna do the Q&A. First, if you have any questions, just ping me or text me or whatever you call it, and then I will let you ask your question. So before, I have 3 questions here that I wish to ask our speaker, Ms. Garcia. Before that, I have a question for Basso. First, we're gonna address that first before I ask my question. So I'm gonna unmute him. And so Basso, go ahead. The floor is yours. Hello? Let me think. You can ask your question.
Hey, Musa, if it's okay, can I jump in?
Yeah, jump in. Go ahead. Go ahead, sir.
All right. Violeta, thank you so much for this presentation. It was very well presented, easy structure to follow, especially for those of us, that are not, savvy about this field. So really appreciated that. One question that I have is for those of us, maybe not myself, but, who are attending this webinar or who might be viewing it later, who are considering entering the field, what's the journey like, to make a breakthrough this field? I kind of heard, your experience, because we have that close relationship, but it would be great if you kind of share, some of the challenges that you had to go through, and also, the opportunities that you've been able to access, through this journey. I think you might be on mute.
Okay,
Violeta.
can you guys? Yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, thanks for that question. Sorry, I was having issues finding the unmute button. But,
the mute button.
Yeah, that's a great.
Hey, Garcia, the shortcut is Control D. You can Control D at the same time. Yeah.
Awesome. Yes. So in my particular case, I'm working on this field as a generalist, meaning I'm on the managing side of things. I'm no expert in anything, right? So from someone with my background, I think the easiest thing to start is, of course, I went through all of the internship kind of things that you need to do. And the first country that I went field-wise was the Central African Republic, which is one of the, I guess, hardest country to live in or serve in. So there's not like a long line of people applying to those kind of jobs. So I started with a very generalist program. I think I was a program associate. So the person doing everything, a bit of monitoring and evaluation, a bit of report writing, a bit of this and that. It's easier, I guess, or it's another way of accessing the field if you are a technical person. And a technical person could be, for example, a nurse, a doctor, an engineer, anyone working on the finance sector, because any big institution has like the programmatic side of things, which is where I work. And then they has the support side of things. So we have people that work in HR, we have people that work in accounting, we have people that work in all of those things. So if you already have like a mid-level person in your career, you're like halfway through, you're like in your 20s, 30s, you have like a couple of years of experience and you want to make that jump, it's much easier to do it if you have that kind of technical expertise. If you happen to be like a generalist like me, there's also ways of going through that, but I'm just going to keep it short so I give other people a chance to ask questions.
Very good answer. Okay, so I have a question here for one of our participants. What is it here? So what are the resources available within your program and for what kind of constitutions?
Let me see 1 second. So what kind of resources or what kind of programming? Let me look at the chat really quickly.
Yeah.
In your program, what kind of constituents? So if I'm getting it right, the question is geared toward what kind of programming we do, what kind of service we provide, right? Okay, so I'm going to answer from that angle. So I'm currently working for a peace building organization. So our strength is processes, right? We don't give things. We're not, we don't give in cash or in kind assistance. We don't give computers or food. We don't do those kind of distributions. For example, if we know there's conflict somewhere, we can set up the process for two groups of people that are normally not talking to each other to start seeing eye to eye. So we do a lot of that. In Iraq, for example, there's a big divide between, I'm going to simplify it very much, but between the Sunni community and the Shia community, as the Sunnis are very much perceived to have helped ISIS during the occupation. And not every single person on the Sunni side helped ISIS, but that's somehow hard to see. So we are setting up dialogue mechanisms for bringing those two people that, or those two groups of people that don't see eye to eye in specific areas and see how that looks like. Other work that we do is that, for example, in Iraq, we find that a lot of normal people are not involved in governance, and Iraqis don't have a strong system of accountability towards governance. So, for example, the central government decides what the national budget should be for. So one of the things that we're doing is including these people in their local communities to be able to have a say in how they think federal budgets should be spent in their particular areas. That's in my current job. In the past, I've worked with doing psychosocial support, not myself. Again, I'm the person managing, but I'm not the person doing the psychosocial support, but providing psychosocial support services to people that have gone through war in Libya and educating people on landmines. There's a lot of remnant explosive devices in Libya. So many times kids see something that is shiny, they take it, they play with it, boom. So we had a program that was teaching kids how not to touch these things when you see them, just to make it simple. When I was working with Amnesty International, we provided awareness, right, in terms of human rights violations that are happening around the world. So those are the kind of things we do. But in this field, there's pretty much everything you can think of. You have human rights, you have people building bridges, you have people working on crops and agriculture. You have, of course, the health system. You have so many different things.
Good. Thank you. So I have a couple of questions for you here. Before I ask you the question, I want to provide some context here. So my question is, so according to the Foreign on Council Relations, the U.S. spent $1.2 billion in 2016 on foreign aid, right? And which are 1.2% of its 2016 annual budget of foreign aid, and which accounted for $49 billion, right? And you say you work in Iraq. And the first big recipient on that list was Iraq for $1.3 billion. So in light of your humanitarian experience, do you think that one, foreign aid is helping developing countries, or two, is making them dependent?
Yeah, that's the answer of this. That's the question of the century. It's complicated. I guess you would have to look at it country by country, but one could easily argue both. One could really easily argue both. The thing is, especially with humanitarian assistance, sometimes you have to, what it comes down to, for example, as I think of Yemen, you have a lot of children dying of hunger, right? Because there's no one that can give them food right now because of the war that they have or the conflict that they have. Is it, so to me, the question might be, is it worth making a country dependable on foreign aid because of the lives you're willing to save, right? So it's a bit of a struggle. I don't have like the answers to all of that. I have seen cases in which governments just know that they're going to get foreign assistance, so let it come. At the same time, many times that foreign assistance, especially development assistance, is geared towards building the capacities of that country so that there's an exit strategy for that development funds. If you have a program and you don't see no end to that program, if you don't have what we call it an exit strategy, then your program may not be doing as much. It may not be sustainable over time. And sustainability is one of the principles we look at, right? So we're trying to not just throw stuff at you. Like, sure, if you're doing a food distribution, you're just throwing food, but there's going to be programs coming after that that are going to teach you how to do your crops, your fields, how to, So it only works if those two components are there. Let's address the immediate need, and then let's build the capacity for you to be able to do it afterwards.
Very good. Very good. See, there's any question for anybody? I can.
Yeah, this is Mido. I have one. Actually, it's not a question, but it's more about first Aslema. I'm the one from Tunisia.
Really?
I'm good. I'm good, thank you. So it's more about what was like the best experience and the most challenging one. Like two experiences, the best and the most challenging one. I know for the best, except for the food in Tunisia, but
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me start by saying that my 3 years in Tunis were pretty much the best of my life, including the food.
You smile on Medo's face.
Huh?
I say you made his day.
No, but the food was amazing. In terms of work, I had a very challenging experience, or one of the most difficult things I had a hard time in the Central African Republic, let's just put it that way, because I felt like a lot of our interventions were not having the desired effect. So many times I'm going to simplify things a lot. There was a specific neighborhood in Bangui, which is the capital, that there was a lot of mistrust and a lot of fighting between Muslims and Christians. It went way past religion. It had to do with power. It has to do with resources. It has to do with a lot of things. But the way it showed is Muslim and Christians fighting, right? And I remember one of the things we did was, let's do soccer teams. And I just saw that they had a soccer team of Muslims and then a soccer team of Christians, and they played for 2 hours. And that night you had like fighting and blood and people dying all the time because of, so it was like, what exactly are we doing? Like, why are we, for example, not doing mixed teams? Something as simple as that, like, why aren't we thinking this through? And like one of these times in the Central African Republic, we ended up going to the bush, I guess, to one of these towns inside of the Central African Republic, where I just went over there, and we went to do this like theater play, because we usually we use a lot of theater to show values and to bring people out of their homes. And I remember that one of us brought candy, because they were like, bring candy for the kids, whatever. So we brought candy for the kids. And I saw the kids pretty much killing themselves to get a piece of candy. They could not care less about dialogue, about peace building, about theater. And it's normal. And it's just they're kids. Kids are kids everywhere in the world. But like, coming from a perspective where you think that, you want to bring value and add value, and seeing that kids really care about the candy and everything else, they don't care about it. I really thought, what am I doing this for? So that was a really bad experience. a really good experience in Iraq has been that, I mean, I don't want to disclose much because these are ongoing peace building processes and I don't want to like spill the beans and secrecy and whatever. But bringing two groups of people that don't talk to each other or where there's blood among each other, and having one of those groups saying, okay, we understand the concerns of this group and we know that they have been displaced for a long time, but all in all, we are okay if they return. We'll set up the process, we'll see how that happens, but we're willing to put aside years of massacre, of blood, and welcome you back. To me, that was an amazing win, and it's things that I wasn't expecting for it to be, I don't want to say that easy, but I didn't expect these people to be so forthcoming about, okay, you can come back now. So that was impressive. That was really impressive.
All right. I have my next question here, which is in the peace building room. If I can get to that in a second here. 1 second. If I can find that. If anyone has any questions, feel free to ask them. So my question was, so peace building, does it mean like a lack of war basically means peace? Because for me, if it is food insecurity, if it is no electricity, food, those can incite war, right? So what has been your experience about quote unquote sustainable peace?
Right. So yeah, you make a very good point. Peace building is not just the absence of war, and peace, sustainable peace cannot happen if all of these other underlying factors that are key for people to thrive, not just to survive, are in place. You can really not have sustainable peace if you don't have access to food, right? Because food is conflict. You cannot have sustainable peace if societies are not resilient. If you have scarcity of resources, there's going to be conflict. And conflict can be armed and not armed. It doesn't need to be a war for you to call it conflict, right? So a lot of the peace building that we do has to do with reconciliation, but not just. So in terms of reconciliation, once war is over, it doesn't mean that two people that yesterday were killing each other today are going to be fine talking to each other. It just doesn't happen over time. So working on, for example, truth commissions or reconciliation among groups and even reconciliation between political parties or governments, that is peace building. Addressing structural causes of conflict, such as power dynamics, that is peace building. We do peace building work over, for example, where do people live? We have conflicts in Iraq of people saying that I've been living here for the past 2,000 years, and now we have all of those people that are not from here coming to our towns. We don't want them here. That is peace building, right? And there's no war. There's not even blood at this point. Well, there's blood somewhere, but for this particular case, there's no blood conflict, but there is conflict. So you have to go much deeper than weapons and war and whatever. The peace building is much more than that. That's why it's very complicated to understand everything that peace building encompasses, I guess.
And my last question in here is, I would like to build on the question that Mr. Drame asked earlier. So have you had any African colleagues that you are working in your line of work during your experience? If so, what have you learned from those African folks in that conviction to help Africa in its development journey? Can you please share with that for us?
So let me tell you, it's so funny because, okay, when I was working in the Central African Republic, I had a lot of colleagues that were from the Central African Republic. It is so funny because a lot of the people working in I don't want to say everyone, so I would like to generally say that everyone working in development field is for development and believes in that. But at the same time, development work has created so many jobs for expats and locals. So many people end up doing their job because it is just another job, right? Especially the people that work, for example, in finance. They could be working in finance in a private company, or they could be working in finance in an NGO. So it's working in an NGO or in an institution that works for peace, for humanitarian work, for development. It's just one avenue. Then I've seen so many other Africans that are working private sector, are advancing their countries, right? You could work in whatever industry. If you're creating jobs, you're doing something for your country. You could be working on entrepreneurship and you're doing something for your country. So I don't think humanitarian work is just the one avenue for reaching, for like furthering development, right? So don't think about it as an African country, think about it as any given country. Like if I think of Spain, what are people in Spain doing to advance Spain? They're creating jobs, they're getting educated, they're doing same for Africa. Same for Africa. And again, very simplified and very, yeah.
Very good.
Hey,
Any other questions?
yeah. Hey, this is Cheryl here. I have a quick question. My question is just to know which, international organization are you working with as of today? Which one do you associate yourself with?
So right now I'm working with the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is it's an institution. It's not an NGO. It's an institution. It was funded by Congress in 1984. It's independent from government, and it has a bipartisan board. But again, I really have to say all views are my own. So I'm not speaking on behalf of USIP.
All right, cool. Thanks.
Good. That was those were good questions, good answers. Thank you, Ms. Garcia. This was really great. I think you and I talk about this. We are always here on the go. Having somebody like you come speak to us to disrupt our thinking process sometimes. Take everything that you have said to us and go sit down and then practice it is very, very, very good. Thank you. And I hope we'll do this again. We would love to have you again. On this topic. Perhaps we'll talk about another topic. Another time. So thank you. And on behalf of the We Network team, we want to thank you so much, for your time today. And with that being said, I'm going to share my screen for you guys here.
Yeah.
And there we go. Let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Okay, super. Now, let me go here to our presentation here. All right, so We Network, where can you find us? Well, we are on all those platforms, on LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We also have a WhatsApp group. All right, so if you would like to join us, please go ahead and join us, or you can call me, you can call any of our members. We have our phone numbers listed on our social media platform. Reach out to us if you want to be part of this course. So to my last comments about this presentation, obviously we had a great presenter today, is I invite all of you to join our course and get the word out there. We need this, especially our communities, not only the African communities, but any community that wishes to strive in life need this kind of discussion, right? And we also, one thing that I'm really passionate about, let's make sure like we put our prejudices on the side, our judgment on the side when we meet people, right? Let's try to connect with people, genuinely, because at the end of the day, we are humans. We need it for one another. And also, we are better together. So that's my comment. Your feedback is very important. Every time we do things like this, events, whether it's a physical event or webinar, I send out like a survey for people to give us your feedback. So your feedback is very, very important to us. It's going to be anonymous, so you can say anything you want. I won't be able to figure out who said it, so please provide us your feedback. And then with that, thank you for your time today. If anyone has anything to say, I'm glad we're on time, So, do you have anything to say before we adjourn the seminar?
Yeah, I just want to thank Mrs. Violeta. Thank you for all the work you're doing. And hopefully maybe one day we can meet in person, maybe in Tunisia, So
Yeah, I hope so. I just wanted to say very quickly, thank you all for having me. It's really cool to hear your questions. They do make me think. And the last thing I wanted to say is that I'm on LinkedIn. I guess I'm on Facebook. So Musa has my contact information. So if anyone wants to reach out formally, informally, always feel free. I'm more than available, and it's also interesting for me to hear your thoughts and not the other way around. So I'm ready to. Thank you.
Good. Awesome. Super. With that being said, you guys have a great day, and Ms. Garcia, you have a wonderful night. I know it's at nighttime in Spain right now, so yeah. Super. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Violeta. Thank you, guys. Bye-bye.
Guys, bye.
Much.